Hey kiddies, it's Triple Feature Tuesday, and this week we look at Mighty Marvel Mishaps. Yeah, being 1 week away from Avengers Age of Ultron, it's finally here. I thought we'd go back in time and look at what used to happen before Marvel was the well-oiled movie machine that it is, and take a look at what weren't mega blockbusters, but were mega bombs. What's fun about these is that, by and large, they tried to distance themselves from the source material as much as possible to their misfortune, because, as evidence, make it more like the Thing that's been selling comics for 50 years, and probably there's an audience for it. Other fun fact, other than the one with the duck, none of these were released in theater, but all of them were intended to be. So our menu is going to include the 1990 Captain America, the 1989 Punisher, and Howard the Duck. You have to understand, the tendency is just going to be, it sucked, but I'm going to try to be a bit more articulate and thorough. The 1990 Captain America movie. We're going to be going in order of increasing watchableness, not necessarily goodness, because as people have explained, what I think is good is usually not good, and what I think is bad is just boring. The 1990 Captain America movie, starring the son of J.D. Salinger, noted author and recluse, Matt Salinger. It's really just boring. I think Captain America is in costume maybe 3, maybe 4 times throughout the whole thing. And it's just very low rent, very low budget. They tried to basically make it a thinly veiled environmentalism PSA. The costume doesn't look terrible, honestly. I mean, it's the Captain America costume. You're into it or you're not. I thought it was very clever in the first Avenger, Chris Evans movie, how that costume was essentially a USO type of thing, and then he moved on to the real costume. But seeing this costume in action was not the worst part of this movie. This was one of the better things. It's just sort of ridiculous. They turned Red Skull into an Italian fascist instead of making him super Nazi, which, guys, he's got one thing, and you took it away from him. Okay, 2 things, because he at least had the Red Skull for the beginning, and then they took that away from him too, so he's just this Italian dude who grew up to be a Italian mobster type of guy, crime family, like arms dealer guy, who doesn't have a red skull. And then Matt Salinger is just running around as Captain America. I love it. In the very beginning of the movie, he gets his ass kicked, and then he progressively just keeps getting his ass kicked. He's running around and not really getting any of the job done until the very end when he has to, because, he's the hero and all. But to their credit, a lot of the things, they got like the origin right. They tweaked it so that the scientist was a woman, which, sure, why not? And she died, and then he gets frozen, and then he comes back, and there's all sorts of, this is what you missed humor, like a la Austin Powers. But at the end of the day, it's just dull. It drags. There's just not a lot of spectacle to a movie where your main character predominantly is wearing an American flag. What's going on here? And this was part of why it took forever for, modern comic book movies to be good again. And what's even weirder is that, this one came out after Batman, where you saw, embracing the ridiculous is a viable option, and they chose not to, so it was just sad and boring. Alright, here's the thing. I really like the Dolph Lundgren Punisher movie, because at its heart, the Punisher comics, especially in the 80s, were over-the-top parodies of already over-the-top 80s action movies. So it made perfect sense to get Dolph Lundgren, one of the biggest stars of over-the-top action movies, to play Frank Castle. And, okay, no, he does not have the skull on his shirt. But other than that, he's Frank. I mean, he is just dead inside, and the only thing that gets him out of his bed, which is, in a sewer, is going out and murdering criminals. All right, let's do this. And it's got like every good 80s action movie cliche with like Italian mobsters and the Yakuza, and Dolph just throwing these knives with skulls embedded in them, and nobody knows what's going on. And some pretty decent performances by Jaron Krabby as, your stock European jerk, and Lou Gossett Jr., always a good time. Dolph is Dolph, no matter what movie he's in. We got different flavors of Dolph throughout the years. I'm a particular fan of Johnny Mnemonic Dolph or Expendables thinly veiled actual Dolph. But Frank Castle Dolph, he's really acting. He just doesn't want to be alive. And basically, and this is a completely viable version of the Punisher, where he wants to kill himself, but he wants to kill as many people that he views as evil along the way. How does it stack up against the other two movies? I would say fairly well. It kicks the shit out of the Tom Jane Punisher movie, which is a shame because I love Tom Jane. I think he could be a great Punisher, if only evidenced by his wonderful fan film. Isn't it cool? Tom Jane, who played the Punisher, made a Punisher fan film starring Tom Jane as the Punisher. It's called Laundry Day. It's on YouTube. Check it out. But his Punisher movie, it just wasn't the Punisher. It was this guy who came up with hijinks and played pranks on the mob instead of just murdering everyone. The Dolph Lundgren Punisher movie does not beat the wonderful Ray Stevenson Punisher Warzone, because the Punisher Warzone movie is just Garth Ennis pre-Max Punisher put on film in all its absurd glory. But Dolph Lundgren Punisher, you could do a lot worse with your afternoon than watching a good old-fashioned 80s action movie with Dolph Lundgren as, a pseudo-superhero who never was a superhero. Punisher was never a superhero, guys. He just went around shooting people in the head. Yes, they were all bad, but let's be real. He's entertaining as shit, but don't ever call him a superhero. I'll get it out of the way. Howard the Duck is a bad movie. It just is. The budget wasn't there. The special effects weren't there. The plot meanders until it almost really... You can almost see the moment where it realized, oh shit, we actually have to have a conflict of some sort, so let's just get this over with. And then they do that, and that's the last half hour of the movie. Here's the thing. It is a movie about this anthropomorphic duck walking around trapped in a world he never made. So, if only in terms of just strangeness, you can't hate Howard the Duck. Or at the very least, I can't. And part of it might be because I was like 6 or 7 when it came out, so it was the exact right age, and I don't know from good movies back then. Not like I do now. Starring a series of dwarves and the voice of Chip Zien as the titular Howard the Duck, and the always lovely Leia Thompson as Bev. Also featuring Tim Robbins as a dork, and Jeffrey Jones as a mad scientist turned possessed evil dark lord of the universe. I just like it. I'm sorry, it is such a complete 80s movie, like in the best sort of way. Like the whole ending where it ends with Bev's band performing a song, and then they just throw Howard a guitar, and now Howard the Duck is playing guitar with everybody. I think they get the character of Howard right in terms of like just being a put upon and angry at the world and a complete sarcastic jerk. But man, there's a lot of just dead space in that movie. Yeah, because they lost a lot of the sarcastic and absurd nature of Steve Gerber's comic books. Because Howard the Duck, the comic, was a lot more parody and social satire, which wasn't present at all in the film, which is a shame because they could have done with the stuff that they had, with like the budget and or special effects available. I mean, fix Howard, make Howard look a little bit better, but you can make it more about Howard's take on the world and how much he hates it. that would have worked. But this was the 80s. This was pre-Blade. Everybody forgets that Blade was the first movie for Marvel that made a shit ton of money. Came out before the X-Men and used a barely viable comic book franchise. Blade, well, never went away. Was never the most popular thing because horror comics at Marvel were never the most popular thing. Which is a shame because they're fucking nuts. But they turned that into a shit ton of money. And then they turned X-Men into an even bigger shit ton of money. And then everything is history. Well, there's some more mishaps before Marvel Studios proper happened. Maybe we'll talk about them again. And or talk about how Daredevil is not one of them. Daredevil was awesome. But it doesn't matter because this is all biding time to the end of the week when I get to see The Avengers Age of Ultron. And I hope everybody else sees it a whole ton of times so we can get a ton more of these movies. And I will see you next week.